The Galactic Academy stood as a shimmering beacon in the depths of space, where the most advanced minds from every corner of the universe gathered. Today, however, was different. The arrival of a student from a Deathworld, the infamous planet Earth, stirred unease among the students. Whispers rippled through the corridors as the shuttle touched down. Earth was a world spoken of in hushed tones, known for its brutal environment, untamable wildlife, and constant natural disasters. To most of the galaxy, it was a mystery how any sentient life could have survived there, let alone thrived. As the shuttle doors slid open, Tyron, the towering reptilian professor, raised his ridged brow. He had taught students from every peaceful corner of the universe, from the icy moons of Plataro to the floating cities of Eotria. But never had he encountered someone from a Deathworld. He watched the human step out with quiet confidence, a figure at odds with his frail appearance compared to the towering forms of the alien students around him. Jack Lawson, Earth's representative at the Academy, was not what they expected. He was shorter than most of his classmates, his skin pale in the artificial lights of the Academy's halls. His muscles were lean, a result of Earth's constant battle for survival, but to the aliens, he seemed unremarkable. His movements, however, were precise, measured, as though each step were calculated, aware of every potential danger around him, an instinct born from surviving Earth's perils. Jack scanned the room, eyes locking briefly with each student before settling on Professor Tyron. The professor cleared his throat, his voice a low rumble. "You are Jack Lawson of Earth," he said, his tone measured. "A student from a Deathworld." The term lingered in the air, its weight evident in the way the other students tensed. The Academy had seen students from far-flung corners of the universe, from planets lush with resources or so stable that danger was an afterthought. Earth, however, was a planet where survival wasn't a choice but a necessity. Its inhabitants were seen as oddities, tough, resilient, but out of place in the peaceful order of the galaxy. "I am," Jack replied, his voice steady, betraying none of the emotions swirling within him, "a towering, crystalline being named Zarnath, whose body shimmered with every movement, tilted its head, emitting a chiming sound. How curious," it said, its voice melodic. "I've always wondered how life managed to survive on such a volatile planet. Surely your species must rely on pure luck to evade extinction." Chuckles erupted from the other students, but Jack remained unfazed. He had expected this. Humans were often viewed with a mix of amusement and disbelief by other species. To them, Earth's chaos was inconceivable. Professor Tyron silenced the laughter with a wave of his clawed hand. "Enough," he commanded, before turning to Jack. "Tell us, human, what does it mean to live on a Deathworld?" Jack took a moment before answering. He could feel their disbelief, their underlying condescension. To them, he was an anomaly, an oddity in a galaxy filled with beings from worlds where danger was a rare occurrence. "Well," Jack began, "it means waking up every day knowing that the world itself is trying to kill you." The room fell silent. For the first time, the curiosity in the alien student's eyes shifted to something closer to fear. Jack continued, "On Earth, we've got storms that can rip apart entire cities, predators that stalk the shadows, and oceans that can swallow you whole. Surviving isn't about luck. It's about being prepared for whatever comes next." A broad-shouldered student from a gas giant world snorted, his voice booming. "Predators? How can your species be so weak that simple animals pose a threat?" Jack met his gaze without flinching. "On Earth, predators aren't simple. They're fast, intelligent, and relentless. Our ancestors didn't survive by being the strongest. They survived by being the smartest." Zarnath chimed again. "Intelligence alone doesn't explain your survival. Surely, your species can't be as fragile as you appear." Jack allowed himself a small smile. "We're tougher than we look. Humans are adaptable. We've had to be. When the environment doesn't bend to your will, you learn to bend to it. You figure out how to survive, how to push through, no matter how impossible it seems." Tyron watched him closely, Interesting. It seems there's more to Earth's people than the story suggests. Jack could feel the shift in the room. They weren't laughing anymore. The curiosity remained, but it was now tinged with something deeper, an understanding that perhaps they had underestimated him. He hadn't come to the Galactic Academy to boast or impress. He was here to learn, to show the galaxy what Earth was truly capable of. But as he stood there, surrounded by students from worlds far more peaceful and prosperous than his own, Jack realized that they might need to learn from him as much as he from them. The professor's deep voice broke the silence. Tomorrow, we'll begin our studies in xenobiology. I suggest you all prepare. His gaze lingered on Jack for a moment longer than the others. Especially you, Mr. Lawson. As the class began to disperse, Jack stayed back, his mind already racing with the challenges ahead. And while the other students might not believe it yet, he was about to show them that Earth's people weren't just survivors. They were warriors. The classroom's atmosphere buzzed with anticipation the next day. Alien students settled into their seats, their varied forms casting long shadows across the gleaming walls of the lecture hall. Jack Lawson sat near the center, aware of the curious gazes that lingered on him. The challenge, spoken in whispers the night before, had spread throughout the academy. Today, the human from the Deathworld would be asked to share his survival stories, tales that seemed implausible, even to the most open-minded species present. Professor Tyron stood at the front. Today, we'll deviate from our planned lesson, he announced, his voice heavy with authority. We will instead hear from Mr. Lawson about life on Earth, our galaxy's most dangerous inhabited world. I trust you'll listen carefully. Jack felt the weight of every eye in the room fall upon him. He took a deep breath, leaning forward slightly as if weighing how to begin. He knew the aliens surrounding him couldn't fully grasp the intricacies of Earth's dangers, so he decided to start with something they could relate to, the idea of being hunted. One of the first things you learn on Earth, Jack began, is that you're not always at the top of the food chain. A murmur passed through the room, and a student from the aquatic world of Selfiery, whose translucent skin rippled with changing colors, raised a finned hand. You mean to say there are creatures more dangerous than your species? Beasts that can kill your kind? Jack nodded, unfazed by the skepticism in the alien's voice. Plenty of them. I'll start with one, an animal we call the crocodile. He saw confusion ripple across the faces of his classmates, so he continued. Imagine an armored predator, ancient, nearly unchanged for millions of years. It's as long as two of your hovercraft, with jaws that snap shut faster than you can blink. It waits, submerged in water, invisible to the eye, before striking with incredible speed. Zarneth flickered in disbelief. Surely your people have weapons or defenses against such a creature. Jack smiled faintly. We do, but in places where crocodiles thrive, there's still a very real threat, especially to those who aren't careful. I remember once, as a child, my family visited a river known for crocodiles. My cousin, only a few feet from the shore, bent down to drink. That's when it struck. The room grew quieter, the tension thick. Jack's words had captured their attention now, and he didn't hold back. It was fast, too fast. The water exploded, and the next thing I knew, my cousin was being dragged under. You don't get many second chances when a crocodile grabs you, but he fought. He knew to aim for the eyes, to thrash wildly to avoid the death roll. Death roll? A metallic-voiced student echoed. It's how they kill, Jack explained. They grab, hold, and spin, tearing their prey apart in the water. But my cousin survived by staying calm, jabbing the crocodile's eye with a stick he grabbed from the riverbed. He limped out of that river missing half his leg, but alive. The room fell silent again, this time not from disbelief, but from the sheer terror painted by Jack's words. Even in the calmest corners of the galaxy, such close brushes with death were rare. For Earthlings, it seemed all too common. Professor Tyron, leaning against his podium, nodded thoughtfully. And yet, you survive. Your species endures. Jack's gaze swept the room. Because we've had to. Earth doesn't give us a choice. But predators aren't the only danger. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle before moving on. Our planet is just as unpredictable as its creatures. I was 15 when I saw my first tornado. We were on a family road trip, and suddenly, the sky darkened. The winds picked up faster and faster, until it sounded like the roar of 100 spaceships. The air itself twisted into a funnel, a spinning tower of destruction that tore apart everything in its path. A murmur of shock ran through the room. Even the students from Gas Giants, who were accustomed to violent storms, looked impressed. A student from Valorax Prime, a planet with gentle, regulated climates, spoke up, her voice trembling. How can your people survive in such chaos? Jack shrugged. We run, we hide, and when that doesn't work, we rebuild. After that tornado, we lost half our town. Houses gone, cars flung miles away. But we're used to it. On Earth, you learn quickly that the planet doesn't care about your plans. You adapt or you don't make it. The class sat in stunned silence. For them, natural disasters were rare. Controlled events, something to be studied and not survived. But here was this human, recounting them as if they were just another fact of life. Jack continued. What you don't realize is that survival on Earth isn't just about facing one kind of danger. It's about facing them all at once. We've got hurricanes that flood entire cities, volcanoes that bury civilizations in ash, earthquakes that crack the ground beneath your feet. And through all of it, we keep going. Tyron watched his students' reactions carefully before turning back to Jack. It seems, then, that your people's greatest strength is endurance. Jack nodded. Endurance, adaptability, and a refusal to give up. We don't survive on Earth because we're the strongest. We survive because we learn, we adapt, and we push through no matter what the planet throws at us. The room was quieter now, the initial skepticism replaced with awe. Jack could feel the shift. Their view of Earth, of him, was changing. They weren't laughing anymore. The class had come expecting to hear tall tales, but now they were beginning to understand the harsh reality behind them. Professor Tyron straightened up, his voice gruff. Tomorrow, we'll continue our discussions. But today, Mr. Lawson has shown us that there's more to survival than we thought. As the students filed out, still murmuring in awe, Jack remained seated, a small, knowing smile on his face. He had their attention now. The next day, the atmosphere in the lecture hall was taut with anticipation. Word of Jack Lawson's harrowing tales had spread like wildfire across the Galactic Academy. Students who had once dismissed the human as a weak curiosity now looked at him with a mix of fascination and wariness. They had heard stories of predators and natural disasters, each more terrifying than the last. But today, as Jack took his seat, they knew they were in for something even more profound, a story that would test the limits of their imaginations. Professor Tyron, standing at the front, could feel the shift in the room. He had witnessed the growing respect for the human from Earth, though the skepticism from a few remained. With a nod, he addressed Jack. Mr. Lawson, we have heard much about your Deathworld, yet I sense there is more. Tell us, what is the greatest test of survival you have faced? Jack leaned forward, locking eyes with the professor before turning his gaze to the room full of curious faces. I've told you about predators and disasters, he began, his voice low but commanding. But the hardest challenge isn't always something you can see coming. Sometimes it's the combination of everything all at once. The room fell deathly silent, every student hanging on Jack's words. This happened during what we call an earthquake, Jack continued, his voice steady. I was visiting the Pacific coast with my family. It was a bright, sunny day. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, without warning, the ground beneath us started to shake violently. It was as if the planet itself was furious. Buildings swayed, the ground cracked, and in moments, everything was thrown into chaos. Jack paused, the vivid memory reflected in his eyes. But that wasn't the worst of it, because Earth likes to pile on. As the earthquake hit, it triggered a tsunami, a massive wall of water, building up in the ocean and rushing towards the shore. We had minutes, maybe less, to find higher ground. An alien student from the peaceful planet of Caltrix, where the climate was perfectly regulated, let out an audible gasp. A wave? Big enough to wipe out everything. Jack nodded, his expression grim. Imagine a wave tall enough to swallow skyscrapers. That's what was coming for us. My family and I, along with hundreds of others, were scrambling to escape. But even as we ran, the earthquake wasn't done. The ground kept shifting, opening fissures in the streets, making it nearly impossible to stay on your feet. One of the students, a slender being from a moon where gravity was weak and calm, shook its head. How could you survive such chaos? Both land and sea were trying to kill you. Jack met the alien's gaze, his voice soft but powerful. You don't have a choice. You survive because you have to. We ran as fast as we could, dodging falling debris, leaping over cracks in the earth, and with the ocean chasing us. We finally reached the hills, where we thought we might be safe. But that's when the wildfire started. A collective gasp swept through the room, the students visibly recoiling. Jack saw the disbelief in their eyes and continued. Earthquakes often spark fires. Gas lines rupture. Buildings collapse, and suddenly you've got walls of flame on top of everything else. We were surrounded, water coming from one side, fire from the other. There was nowhere to go. Professor Tyron, who had remained silent up to this point, leaned forward. How did you survive? Jack's expression hardened, and he glanced at his audience, the tension in the room palpable. We did what humans do best. We adapted. We climbed through the smoke-filled air, following an old forest trail that was barely visible through the flames. There were moments when it felt like the heat would overwhelm us, or that the ground would give way beneath our feet. But we kept moving. There's no time to think about pain or fear. You just survive. The students were silent now, fully immersed in Jack's story. The bravado some of them had shown before had melted away. They were no longer doubting Jack's words. They were trying to comprehend the sheer intensity of what it meant to live on Earth. Jack's voice softened as he neared the end of his tale. Eventually, we reached a safe spot, high enough to escape the water and far enough from the fires. But not everyone was so lucky. Earth isn't a world that lets you rest. It's relentless. And you learn to be relentless too, or you don't make it. The silence that followed was heavy. Jack could see the shift in their faces, the understanding finally settling in. These alien students, who had never faced the kind of raw, unyielding danger Earth presented, were finally beginning to grasp what it meant to survive on his home planet. Earth was not just a place of danger. It was a crucible that forged its inhabitants into something stronger than they appeared. Zarnath, the crystalline being who had initially mocked Jack's fragility, now spoke in a tone of quiet respect. Your world. It sounds as though every day is a battle for survival. Jack shrugged. In a way, it is, but it makes us who we are. We don't have the luxury of peace or safety, but we have something else. Resilience. Professor Tyron stood, his imposing figure casting a long shadow. Mr. Lawson, he said, his voice carrying a newfound respect. Your people's strength lies not in their technology or power, but in their ability to endure. You have shown us that survival is more than just avoiding death. It's about facing the impossible and finding a way through. Jack gave a slight nod, understanding that he had finally earned their respect. He had come to the academy as a curiosity, but now he was leaving this room as something more, a survivor from a Deathworld and a student who had much to teach. As the class filed out, the weight of Jack's stories lingered in the air. They would never look at Earth, or him, the same way again.